Always thankful to come out to worship here at the Lenoir City Church of Christ. Today we are going to be finishing been talking about homes, we've been talking about fathers, we've been talking about mothers, and today we're going to be talking about children. But oftentimes when we think about honoring your father and mother, right, that was usually used from my parents to say, listen up, sonny boy. Right? Honor your father and mother, for it is right. Right? And so it was usually a command to obey because I was in the process of probably not obeying or rebelling a little bit. And so what I want to do is kind of take apart that phrase a little bit this morning and really try to get at what is God trying to get us to understand. What is so important? Right? God never gives us a command or a law that is just because, right? Just because. Now, a household goes a whole lot better, right, when there is obedience in the home. But is there something more that we can learn than just obedience in the home? Because what happens when I move out? Well, I'm 18 or 19 or 20. I'm out of my parents' house now. That whole honoring your father and mother thing just seems to go away. You can't tell me what to do anymore. Right? You have nothing over me because now I'm my own man. Or I'm my own woman. I'm out of the house. You don't own me. You can't give me a curfew. If I want to eat a bowl of cereal at 10 o'clock at night, I'm going to eat a bowl of cereal at 10 o'clock. You get married and they tell you no after that. But that's another thing. Right? You just move from one lawmaker to another, really. And so what we want to talk about this morning is really, what does this promise mean? Because Paul, and we're going to see this a little bit, he makes a point to say that this is the first command with a promise. That you would live long in the land. Now, the way I interpreted that at 12, 13, 14 years old is my parents brought me into this world. They can take me out of this world, right? It's usually used as a fear tactic, but that's not necessarily what God is trying to get at. But I do want us to understand that God has designed three institutions in this world. The first one, found in the very first book, the very first chapter of the Bible, was to establish the home. Okay? To establish a mom and a dad who leave their parents, right? Leave and cleave, or cleave and, yeah. They cleave. All right, leave and cleave, yep. And they come and they form their own home. But as you see, especially as you're reading in the Old Testament, is that just because you've gone and left and formed your own home, oftentimes you build a house right next to your mom and dad. And they still had to live in this community together, right? They still had to thrive together. And so what I'm going to propose is that God designed the family to bless the world, right? And God's design for the world is through the family. Which is why I believe families are under attack. Think about that. Why is it that there are so many, whether it's television shows or teachers or doctors or nurses, who are constantly trying to separate the children and parents? Right, you got doctors telling their kids, hey, you don't got to tell your mom and dad this. Or you got teachers trying to teach, the kids, hey, what we say here, you don't got to go home and tell your mom and dad. What happens here stays here. We can talk about it, right? And then you got the media who comes in and they try to make a mockery of what God has designed as we sang before, a Christian home, right? Where a mom and a dad come together and they serve God together. They have kids, right? And each of them play a part and each of them play a role. God has designed it in a way for the flourishment of communities, of churches, and of the world, right? And so what we're going to be learning at is if we can learn to honor our father and mother at home, we're going to live in a strong nation, in a strong community, and ultimately strong churches, right? If we have families that are coming together that have honoring the father and mother, and what's so important about that? And that's what we're really going to be looking at, right? How does A lead us to B? Okay? Are they just correlations Or is there a formula, right? Is there a reason? And so that's what we're going to kind of look at. First, what does honoring really mean? The Hebrew word for honor just means it's really heavy. It's a heavy weight, right? It's, the other day I was putting a backpack on Leah, and she had her backpack. I was telling her to take it upstairs, and I knew when I picked it up, I knew how heavy it was. So what I did was I kind of held it. I put it around one arm for her and just let it rest a little bit, and then she was about to put it on the other arm, and I just dropped it and let the whole weight, right? And she was like, whoa, I didn't realize how heavy that was. And that's the word. It just means something that is heavy. And whenever you're lifting something heavy, what do? You have strength, but you give time, care, and attention, especially the older you get. As a young person, heavy things and light things, right? You don't care. You're not worried about how you lift, using the proper motions. Now, if I don't lift with my legs and not my back, right, I can't walk for about 3 days, right? And so I give careful time and attention to things that are heavy. And that Hebrew word picture translates to it's important to you. Right? So this reverence or this honoring your father and mother means you make them important. You make them important because the natural tendency is when kids are getting older and they're forming their own ideas, they're forming their own thoughts, they have their own ways of looking at the world, is that I want to rebel not because I just want to rebel and be this rebellious kid, is I know what's best for me. Right? I know what's best for me. And my parents, they just don't know. Right? My parents just don't know. And it's funny because I heard these same sermons growing up, and I laughed at preachers when they told me that one day I would look at my parents and go, wow, they know a whole lot more than I thought they did. And now I'm up here repeating the same slogan going, one day you're going to realize your parents knew a whole lot more than you thought. And sometimes you're going to look at me and you're going to go, Jesse, I understand what you're saying, but you don't know my parents. And that may be true. There may be some parents out there, right, that just don't know nothing, but I don't know very many, right? Even what we'll call non-Christian parents, if they've lived in the world, they've gained experiences that are valuable. They've gained experience that is valuable. One of the reasons why the Bible has so many stories in it, it's a book of stories, isn't it? I mean, it's like 80% narrative. It's so that you can look at someone else's life and go, I don't want to do that. Or, hey, I want to be that kind of person. And so parents, just experience alone, have a lot of value that they can bring. And so you have to strive. Honoring parents is not just about obedience, but it's about embracing love, learning to love your parents. And it can be hard to love your parents at times because they're the ones who have to say all the hard things. They're the ones who have to tell you the tough things. They're not your friends, right? They're not there every not well thought out decision or action you made are not there behind you supporting you like a friend would, right? I had friends that when I would, go do something that's foolish, they'd be like, yeah, man, do it again, right? And my parents are going, please don't ever do that again. Right? And there's a reason why they're saying that. They want me to live long in the land, right? My friends could care less. They just want to see, an Instagram moment of, get the videotape out and show, look what Jesse did, right? But it's embracing love, and it can be hard. And gratitude, right? Gratitude is a big part of this. It's not that you will agree with everything your parents ever say or do. Even in the old age, right? Even in the old age. But the Bible expects that you show gratitude. This is the person that brought you into the world. This is the person that raised you, gave you a roof, gave you shelter, right? Gave you food to eat. And so with that alone, there ought to be a sense of gratitude, right? At least 18 years of your life, this person gave up their life for a little bit, right? Gave up the things they may want to do. I don't really see it as giving up because I brought kids in the world. Right? They shouldn't sacrifice because I brought them into the world. My world just changed to incorporate them, but that's the way we can sometimes see it. Right? But for at least 18 years, and probably many more after, they have sacrificed for me. And sometimes when we get out of the house, that honoring and that gratitude goes away, right? Because we're our own people, Right? I'm my own man. I'm my own woman. I got my own family. I got my own responsibilities. Right? And a lot of times, parents get neglected, especially into the later ages and later stages in life. Right? Well, it's too much to take care of mom and dad. Right? It's too much. It's too expensive. Yeah, I know. So are diapers and formula and, pack and plays and, baby clothes that you change out every 3 months. And they did that for several years for you. Now it's your time to give back. And God expects that attitude of gratitude. If you can't give it to your own parents, this is the point. If you can't show love and gratitude to people who raised you and loved you, how are you going to do it for anybody else? How are you going to show that respect and honor for everybody else? Have you ever met a kid where you realize there's probably not a whole lot of respect and honor going on at home? You've met them. Why? Because the way they talk to you, they haven't been, properly trained and disciplined at home. And so this is something that goes beyond, and it fosters a nurturing environment. They nurtured me. Now it's my job to nurture them. So that's what the word honor in the Bible really is getting at. And so turn your Bibles to Ephesians chapter 6, and we're going to read this. Ephesians 6 says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." I really, I heard that phrase so many times, and the "for this is right" really was emphasized, right? You don't have to ask why, right? Don't ask why. I don't need to give you a reason. It is right, right? But the reason he quotes from Exodus chapter 20 is, "Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise." Now, in Hebrew thought, to live long in the land did not just mean to live in old age. I really like when the Bible Project uses the phrase, the good life. God is constantly trying to give us to live a good life. And not a good life like the world. There is a biblically defined, those who fear God and seek wisdom, they will have a good life. In this phrase, to live long, we would call it quality over quantity. You can live a long life even if it's short because of how good it was, how much you gave back to the world, how much you lived life to the fullest, how much you lived out those Christian virtues and attitudes. Well, where is that learned? It's learned in the home. It's learned in the home. And that's what, especially if parents, moms and dads, and grandparents, right? This goes all the way back to Deuteronomy chapter 6. This is a generational thing, especially if they are raising you right. Remember when Paul would encourage Timothy to live a life of faith. Even though Timothy, Paul was finally going, "Hey, I'm sending you off on your own. I'm in prison. You don't have me anymore." But remember the faith of your mother. And remember the faith of your grandmother. Remember the things that they taught you. Remember the Word of God that you learned from a baby. Keep these things, right? Put them in your heart. Put them in your mind. Put them to use. And this is that proverbial statement, right? Discipline a child, right, in the way he should go, and these things shall not depart from him, right? Train up a child in the way of the Lord. That whole idea is, a lot of people think, well, if I raise my child right, they'll never depart from God. Actually, the Hebrew is to train up a child in the way that he shall go, and these things will never depart from him. Meaning, the values that you taught them, the lessons they learned, they will remember them. Now, they have a choice to follow suit or obey them, but oftentimes I speak to a lot of kids. I won't call them kids anymore, but my generation kind of had this weird, millennials went through this weird, and it happens over and over and over again, but millennials really went through this thing where a lot of millennials are coming back to religion and faith again. But we went through like this early 30s rebellious period, and then we're starting to remember, we're seeing the world go to like, what in the world are we living in, right? You look on the media, you look on all this stuff, and we're like, I don't like that world that doesn't have God. It felt and sounded really good when I was 19 to live a life without God, because that meant what? I could do whatever I wanted to do. And there's a great awakening, by the way, right now, a resurgence, even before the Charlie Kirk incident, right? A resurgence of people coming back to church. And one of the reasons is my mom and dad taught me better than this. They raised me better than this. And you remember the things that you learn, and when things start becoming more valuable, and when life starts getting more real, and you bring kids in the world, and you're looking for a spouse, and you realize, Mom and Dad, they knew what they were talking about. Mom and Dad has some good things to offer. And maybe being in church, right? Maybe being in church has a lot more value than just warming a pew. Right? It has a lot more value than, a checklist. Make sure you're at church. Make sure. Why did they emphasize that all the time? Because hopefully you learned something while you were here. You heard something while you were here that stuck with you. Right? And so, but a part of this with a promise is generations stay connected. Why do we have a problem, a generational problem, where the older generation and the younger generation can't get along? There's a gap in the honoring the father and your mother. By the way, this goes beyond your father and mother. Turn your Bibles with me. I think it's 1 Timothy chapter 5. Let's see here. I'm just remembering this verse now. 1 Timothy chapter 5. Paul is encouraged. I did get it right. 1 Timothy 5:1. There's a reason I read this thing every day. Do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Now, you can only fulfill that verse if you are actually honoring your own father. Honor an older man like you would a dad. Well, if you treat your dad like he's a nobody, how are you going to treat other older men? Where's the respect? Right? And this is Paul telling Timothy. And this is Timothy, a young preacher going out and preaching. And Paul's even reminding him, hey, when you're going out in the world, and you may know more than the people you're going to talk to, there is still a respect and honor for those who are older than you. Right? So do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, in all purity. Right? We are to honor, and so their generations may stay connected. I love when I see those generational photos. You ever see those on like Facebook or social media? Where you've got, we did this not too many years ago, right before my grandfather passed. We went up and saw my whole family, and I had my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mom, my brothers, our kids, right? And there was just this huge generational photo, and you just see all these, right? It's awesome. There are many families who would never even come together to take that picture. Why? Because something went wrong in the honoring the father and mother. Now, once again, this isn't always a kid problem. Kids will see how you, as parents, honor your own father and mother, and they will repeat that. They will repeat that. And in a world, and I try to look up a lot of stats, and stats are good, but stats are also very shaded, right? Whoever's usually putting out a poll is already looking for a certain answer, and so they ask questions in a certain way. But one of the things that kept coming up was the fact that we are now moving away from parents. There's this huge moving away from parents that actually has really hurt that generational connectivity. Why? Because, when you move away from your parents, you really disassociate yourself with anybody of that generation. If you live around your parents and you hang out with your parents, well, your parents have friends and they have friends and you get together and you kind of have these connections. That's why I love our prayer pals. I think our prayer pals is an amazing thing that we have. If you don't know, every member of the congregation who is an adult has a prayer pal, a child in this congregation that we're praying for every single day. That we come together and hopefully show up at their schools and do things for them and get them little gifts. Just let them know we're here for them, right? To try to bridge that generational gap. Well, it starts in the home. Honoring father and mother. Next, wisdom gets passed down, right? If you actually take what your mom and dad have to say as important, right? That honoring, that weight, doesn't mean they're going to say everything that you agree with. It doesn't mean that they're always going to be right. But if they're saying something, you at least need to see, is there something that I can learn from this? Is there wisdom that can be granted me? And you learn something. And then finally, the land. Society itself becomes a place of peace. It becomes a place of peace when you got families who are connected, families who are growing together, families who honor each other. If you can honor your family, you can honor your parents, you can honor your grandparents, you'll also be able to honor those in authority over you. You'll be able to honor those who are of an older generation. You won't just dismiss offhand, right? And so we do have a problem with that. So this is part of that command with a promise. Go with me to Leviticus chapter 19 real quick. Leviticus 19, often called the holy chapter or the holy walk. There's a lot of different ways, the holy commandments. This is where Jesus quotes from a lot. And by the way, the whole love your neighbor as yourself is built in Leviticus chapter 19. Love your neighbor, love your sojourner, right? Feed those who are poor. Don't steal from others. Treat others the way you want to be treated. All that's found in Leviticus 19, but look how it begins. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." So what's the first step to holiness? All right, that's a general term. What does it mean, and what does it look like, and how am I going to be holy? The whole chapter tells you. What's step one? Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father. You shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. If you're going to have the best chance to be the best person in this world, where you look at others and treat others with respect and dignity, right? And we look at each other as human beings, and we'll kind of bring up the stuff that's going on in the world. We won't dehumanize people, right? We won't look at others as evil and wicked and to the point where they're not worthy of having life and living. Starts in the home. Love and revere your mother and your father. That word fear is built into the word revere, but it's not necessarily that terrifying fear, right? There should be a fear, right? I think every child, in one sense, should fear their parents. If I do something wrong, there's going to be a consequence. And if there's no fear that my parents just don't care what I do, that's when society starts going downhill, when there's no fear for taking someone's life. There's no fear for stealing someone's stuff. There's no fear for getting up and just spouting off a bunch of, obscenities. Well, where did that stop in my home? You know where that stopped in my home? First time my mom heard me shout an obscenity was at a baseball game. There was these two older kids who I just thought were the coolest cats in town. Okay, and I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And, I thought, I'm going to speak like they speak. I said one word. I won't even tell you the word because I'm ashamed to say it. My mom heard that. Like bat radar. What'd you just say? Even my two friends were like, and they walked away. Like they saw it. She took me behind those cars where everyone could hear. It wasn't pulled my pants out and just started whooping me. That's the last time I made sure my mom wasn't even within 100 yards of me if I ever used another obscenity, right? But it started right then and there. She set a precedent. We don't talk like that. We don't use that kind of language. Jesse, you're better than that. You're smarter than that, right? It's not just about, hey, that's a bad word, don't use it. It's about there are more intelligent words to use. There are more kind words to use. That doesn't bring grace or peace or life into anybody's heart, right? That just tears people down, and it brings our society down. So honoring that father and mother. And then jump over with me to 1 John chapter 4. I'm going to use some application here. This is a chapter where John is trying to explain to the people, you need to learn to love like God. And the reason why we learn to love like God, hey, leave her in here. We were co-preaching. The reason why, first, look at verse 7 of 1 John chapter 4. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. So first and foremost, love comes from who? Who do we first learn love from? We learn from God, our Father. We learn from God our Father, right? And it should be taught in the home, but look down in verse 20, and he uses this whole why we ought to love. The love abides in the Son. We have come to know God through the Son. The love of God of us is through the Son, right? This relationship between Father and Son is just overly done in this passage. Now look at verse 20. Well, I'm starting verse 19. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. I bet you John would be okay with me using this and saying, if you don't love your father, earthly father, who you can see, how are you going to love your heavenly Father who you cannot see? Right? That same principle would apply, wouldn't it? That honoring father and mother, that reverence for your father and mother. Once again, as you get older, you're not going to agree. Well, they have a different political position than I do. They have a different theology than I do. We have different religious beliefs. We have different whatever. It doesn't matter. You are to honor your father and mother. You are to honor them. You are to respect them. You're to give them time and importance. You don't have to agree with everything that they say, right? But you still need to be respectful, right? You still need to be respectful. And I think, he goes on to say, this is the commandment we have from him. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. So it's kind of cyclical. Which one comes first, love of God or love of mom and dad? They kind of go together. The more you learn to love your mom and dad, the more you can learn to love God. And the more you learn to love God, the more you'll learn to love your mom and dad, right? And it's kind of this, it's not one or the other. It's not put one before the other. It kind of grows with you, right? And the more you learn to love God, the more you learn to love your mom and dad, the more you learn to love your brother, the more you start to learn to love your neighbor, then you can learn to love which is the ultimate, right? Matthew chapter 5. What's the ultimate goal that you are more like your Father than anything else? Is if you can learn to love your enemy. And in a society that we live in today, don't we need that? Don't we need people who are able and willing to love their enemy? If you don't love your enemy, how are you going to preach the gospel to them? How are you going to talk to them about Jesus? Right? If you hate your enemy and you treat them like the way the world treats them, you're just going to stay in disagreement and yelling matches and screaming matches. Love. Pray for them. Right? How are you going to pray for someone you don't love? That's really hard. I'm going to tell you right now, it's really hard. And if you do, you're just going through the motions. Right? You got to learn to love everybody in society. You don't have to agree with everything. And let me tell you, there are times where people need to be punished. People need to be disciplined. But God gave government for that, right? God takes care of all those things. We don't take our own vengeance. Vengeance is the Lord's, right? We learn to love those who hate us, and we heap coals on their head by kill them. That's my mom's phrase, kill them with kindness, right? Man, there's nothing worse than when you're all agitated at someone, right, and you're ready to get in a boxing match with them and fight with them, and you're up here screaming, and you come in, and they just calmly, man, I love you, man. Thank you for coming and telling me that. I appreciate that you have enough respect for me to come and tell me what you really believe. You never feel more like a dummy, right? When someone treats you with kindness when you just came in hot and heavy, right? And that's the way God says, you want to change people's minds? You want to change people's hearts? You want to build families and communities and churches? Learn to love one another, right? That's the first step to a holy life. Paul's wisdom, we brought this up, but I really want to focus on this Ephesians 6:10. This is right in the context where Paul is preparing the church at Ephesus. Be strong in the Lord. Put on the full armor of God. Why? So you can be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. I tell my kids this often, and I tell a lot of kids that I talk to. It's really easy to love your friends, right? Because your friends are the ones who you have fun with. They support you in everything. They're silly. They're like you. But the unfortunate truth is, or fortunate, I don't know how it is, but this is truth. The friends you have now are most likely not the friends you're going to have in 10 years. The friends you have now, or if you do still have them as friend, that friendship has changed. Usually through distance, Usually they start their family, you have your family, you don't get together as often. I remember being 19 and I had a bunch of buddies. We're never going to do that. We're never going to be like that. We're always going to be buddies. We're always going to get together on Friday night. I haven't seen those friends in 15 years. Right? Nor do I really care all that much. I mean, I miss them. And if I do go to see them, it's sporadically, but I've got a family. Right? I go see my mom and dad a whole lot more than I go see them. And I would have never thought that at 19. I would have never thought that at 19. I like to go see my own brothers. Ugh. Right? Physical brothers. You guys are all right too. My physical brothers, more than I go see my friends. And they live just as far away. And who do I talk to more? My family's my family. And I'm going to have them forever. Right? Now apply that to the church family. These are the people I see way more than anybody. Right in this room. If I'm in a pinch, guess who's my first go-to a lot of times? It's you guys. Right? This is the family that supports and loves and encourages, and that's what we're fostering in our homes. If you can foster that in your homes, it will translate into the churches. And if it can translate in the churches, it will translate into people's jobs when they're out with their friends and at workplaces. And if it can transfer there, it can transfer into society. We want to change society? It's not going to be in the vote box, the ballot box, right? It's going to be change every single person's mind that's around you. Change your neighbor, right? You want to change how many votes, right? And once again, I'm not against voting, and I'm not even trying to be, get into that. But I always find it comical. If you want people who are going to elect a good president, a wholesome president, or a wholesome official, well, you need some wholesome voters. I mean, think about it. You need some wholesome voters. Well, let's say there's less wholesome voters than there are wholesome voters. How do you change that? You go to the voters, you go to your neighbors, you go to your friends, you go to your family, and you love them like Jesus. And where's that taught? It's taught in the home. And if you can't honor your father and mother, you're not going to live long in the land. You're not going to live good in the land. You're not going to have a quality land. And imagine if everybody had that kind of home where there was love and respect going on. And we talked about this. Honor is bigger than obedience. It's not just obeying. It's respecting. But what does that look like? It looks like staying in touch. I know it's hard as you move away and you have your own families, but your parents loved you, changed your diapers, fed you. It's your job as kids, in my opinion, to stay in touch with your own parents. You thank them all the time for the sacrifices they made for you. Right? They may not be the best parents. They may not be, you can compare them with 100 different parents out there. They still made sacrifices that they need to be thanked for. Speak kindly about them in public. Right? It's the same thing with husbands and wives. I tell you, the downfall of every marriage, right, is when you start speaking poorly of your husband or your wife just because. Right? Just because. And you don't even care anymore. You want everybody to know how worthless each other are. Right? That's the downfall of a marriage. That's the downfall of a home. That's the downfall of churches, isn't it? It's the downfall of a nation. When all we can do is nitpick, all we can do is tear each other apart, all we can do is speak poorly, speak kindly about your parents. Right? Care for them when they're of age. Care for them. Right? They may not even be good people, but it's still our obligation to care for them. Okay? Seeking their wisdom, even if you make your own choices. This is something I never thought I'd do. Dad, I'm struggling with a decision. Please give me some wisdom. There are times he said stuff to me, I'm like, that was the worst possible thing you could have said. And the other times, like, you know what, that's got a lot of sense. Why? He's lived more life than me. He may not even be the most wise, and I'm not speaking about my dad specifically, because every time I call my dad, it's usually pretty good. But seek their wisdom. One, even if you don't do it, how does that make them feel? Like they're still valued? They still have something to give, right? And I want to tell you right now, a lot of parents, as they kind of grow distant from their kids or distant from their grandkids, they just don't feel like they have a whole lot to offer anymore. And so when you call and say, hey, Dad, I'm going through a decision, or hey, Mom, I'm going through a decision, I really like your input. Man, how would that make them feel? How would it make you feel if someone called you up and said, Jesse, I'm making this decision, and I really could use your advice. You just like, man, you thought of me? That's awesome. Right? Do that from time to time, just to make them feel good. And I believe God will be glorified in this generation, in the next generation, if we can do that. And I'll leave you with one more thing. Jesus on the cross. All the stuff that he's worrying about, and all the stuff that's going on in his mind and his heart, and what does he make sure? He makes sure his mother's taken care of. He looks out when Jesus saw his mother and the disciples whom he loved, John, standing nearby. He said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her in his own home. Why? Because Jesus said, I'm leaving and I can't take care of her anymore. But if I'm going to be gone, I'll make sure she's taken care of. John, will you take care of my mom? That's powerful to me. That Jesus, the Son of God, in this, you wouldn't write an epic narrative. If you were just making this stuff up, writing an epic narrative, right, of the hero coming in, saving the day, and right before he makes the ultimate sacrifice, he kind of pauses the scene. Hey, someone going to take care of my mom? Right? Only a God who has a focus on family, who created in the beginning us in his image, would think to do something like that. And Jesus on the cross, when he's about to bear the sins of the world, he makes sure, John, you take care of my mother. Honor your father and mother, for it is right. It is the first command with a promise that if you honor your father and mother, you will live long in the land. This morning, if you're not a Christian, why not? All right, God being our Father, there's no better Father to honor. He's the one who created us. He loves us. He sustains us. He sustains the world. And one day he's coming back, and he's going to take all of his own, and he's created a kingdom for us. He's created a place for us to live eternally. And there's a room reserved for you if you would only trust and obey. If you would love him, if you would sacrifice for him, have your sins washed away in baptism to rise and walk in newness of life, why not do that this morning? And if you are a Christian, right, I know the honoring father and mother, I thought you guys maybe thought this was going to be a kid's sermon where I got to get all the kids. We're all kids. We're all kids, aren't we? No matter how old you are, you're still a child, right? And if you don't have parents who are living anymore, you still have a Father in heaven who still needs to be honored every single day. Make sure you're doing that. And every morning you wake up, make sure you honor him. When you lay down your head, make sure you honor him in prayer, in love, in service, and deeds. If there's anything that you need this morning, we ask that you come forward as we stand together and sing.